Hello everybody and welcome. My name is Emery PV and this is my game journal on Silent Hill 2. And on this journal I'm going to be focusing very specifically on the ethics aspect of game studies. And I guess before I kind of go into that, I will give a pretty brief overview of this game for anybody who hasn't played it. This is a survival horror game released in 2000 and I believe 4 or 5 for the PlayStation 2. Kind of like Shadow of the Colossus, this is also one of my favorite games ever. And we're kind of starting in the middle here. Apologies, that's very loud. I will also warn really quick too before I forget. If anybody, I will be spoiling the game for one thing, but if anybody has any sort of, I guess, fear or, I'll just be, kind of blunt with it. This game does have a lot of themes of violence, sexual violence, a little bit of gore, nothing like obscene, but and I will be discussing that pretty frankly, so if any of that bothers anybody, just letting you know now. But anyways, here I skipped over the opening segment of this game just because there's not a lot really going on in there, and I'm going to be skipping around this video a bit too. But the opening segment is essentially establishes our character right here of James Sunderland, and he has come to the town of Silent Hill because he has received a letter from his dead wife, who died from some sort of undefined illness about, I think he says 3 years ago, and he said it's a note from her saying to come to our special place, and he has. So, but to go over the gameplay just really quickly, it's actually pretty simple. It's probably the biggest downfall of this game is that it's just so simple. There's pretty much just you hold the right R2 in the PlayStation 2 case to ready your weapon, and then you press X to attack. And that's pretty much it. It's more so about choosing when to fight and when not to. I'm playing on New Game Plus, which is why I have the chainsaw, which is an infinite one-hit kill weapon pretty much on nearly anything except for, I think, bosses. I don't use it for too long, though. But yeah, you're just kind of seeing the gameplay here. And yeah, here we have an enemy, and I'm going to attack him. Like I said, like with my other ones, this is also pre-recorded. But I'm going to kind of go into the ethics style of this game. And well, going right into it, I guess, this game has 5 endings. And each ending goes in a pretty different direction. And it's all based on the player's choice, but it never outright tells you until after you've beaten the game that you can receive other endings. And, well, to just go over them, you meet other characters throughout the game. There's a character you meet named Maria, and she is, as the game unfolds, turns out to be the final boss. She's not there is a villain or an antagonist, I guess you could say, but they don't really have much of a personality. It's just a monster. It represents something important to the game, but it's not, it itself is not really that much of a character. But each ending kind of goes in a different direction. Turns out when you get to the end of the game, once again, spoilers for anybody, but you find out that James actually is the one who killed his wife, and there's a few different reasons besides one that the main reason, honestly, is just that he explains that he was just frustrated having to live with his dying wife, and he felt like he had been very tied down by her, which is a pretty selfish thing, and you, as you play the game throughout, the very subtle things that you do in the game actually will impact your ending. And that's something I really like about this game a lot, is that it never really advertises itself as being a game about choice, and all these different choices you make can lead to different endings. Not that that's bad or anything, but just that for a PlayStation 2 game, it's actually pretty in-depth. And granted, this is, I believe, it's the second release of the game. I think it's not Game of the Year edition, I don't think, but it's I forget the name of it. Oh well, but it's greatest hits PlayStation 2, because whenever a game would sell certain copies, they would re-release it as greatest hits. And this one they actually did add extra stuff in there, which is an extra playable sequence, and I think 2 extra endings. One being a joke ending and one being a final ending. But if I had to describe the endings, I would put them in a few different ways. There's a good ending, quote unquote, which is where, James gets to the end, and once again, depending on all these little things they've done, but there's the character Maria, who is a character who looks just like the character of Mary, James's dead wife, and he kind of goes like, oh, well, like, yeah, I think he even says, I might have the footage of it later, but actually, in that case, I actually will go ahead and just jump to that, and right around here, yep. And he even says himself, you look just like her, everything except for the clothes and hair is the same. And here, I'll just let this play for a moment.
No, you're not.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
No, my late wife. I can't believe it. You could be her twin. Your face, your voice, just your hair and clothes are different.
My name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost.
But yeah, so going back to this point here, just kind of wanted to touch on that just so you guys could get to see the character for a minute there. But yeah, basically throughout the game there's different endings, and by the end of the game you go up to the top of the apartments and you find Mary, and you realize, or I say the apartments, I apologize, you go to the top of the hotel where they had stayed and recorded the video that he sees at the end that triggers his flashback to realize that he murdered his own wife. There is the ending where he goes up there and he faces his wife, and then it turns out it's not actually her, it's Maria. And I think 4 of the 6 endings are involve that. And yeah, the good ending though has it where it goes up there, it's actually Maria in disguise because she wants James to accept her and love her because she doesn't really have any purpose in life unless it's that. He then kills her, and then him and the little girl character, who we will see in a little bit here, named Lauren, who is essentially a surrogate daughter, more or less, for the character of Mary, and James is adopting her, as it were, to take her home, and that is the Leave Town ending. That's probably the happiest ending, because James decides that he wants to start new, forgive himself, because he, in a sense, talks to his wife, and realizes, oh, hey, like, what I did was wrong, but, she kind of says, I forgive you, like, she would forgive him, and he can't live the rest of his life just in shame. And there is a point, I'm getting to the point with explaining these endings in so much depth. The second ending is, here we go, actually, here's where we meet the character of Angela, or sorry, Lauren, I believe. The one flaw I will say in this game is I always thought it was very odd. The character of Lauren is meant, or at least seems to be implied, to be a very innocent person. She's the only one in the town, seemingly, who doesn't see any monsters, because you only see the monsters because they're manifestations of your both guilt but also just kind of evil deeds that people have done, as it were. People who haven't done anything wrong, like her, Obviously, she's a little kid, so I guess that maybe the whatever evil spirits of the town kind of give her some leeway on that. But, anyways, the second ending is the one that most people like. Most people say fits the tone of the game, and, I think even some of the original developers in the game, like throughout the years since the game's come out, says that it's their favorite. But it's called the In Water ending, and that is essentially where it's the same premise. The only difference is that at the end, James will actually drive off. He'll put Mary's body in the back of his car and then drive off into the lake where the hotel that they stayed in overlooked, and he'll drown himself. And it's, implied that, well, James has decided to kill himself. There is then 2 joke endings. There's a UFO ending and a dog ending, which are just there to be funny. I won't really go into those just because they're not really meant to have much of a importance to them, essentially. Then there's the Maria ending, which is, I would say, a bad ending, definitely. And it is where James goes up to the top of the hotel, he fights Mary, but this time it actually is her, and he's essentially being like, well, you're just being selfish, and I don't regret what I did at all. He kills her and then leaves town with Mary, very similar to how he would leave town with Lauren, except, I said earlier how Mary was dying of an illness. As they're walking away, Maria begins to cough, And James says, you should really get that checked out. Leading to the fact that James has learned nothing, and the cycle will just repeat itself. And then there's the final ending, which was one of the added endings into this game, which is called the Rebirth Ending, and I would probably say is I guess you could classify it as an evil ending. They leave it openly ambiguous, but is essentially where throughout the game you will collect these different occult materials, which are all referencing the villains of the first game who were an evil cult. And you actually end the game earlier to where you essentially, when you get to the hotel, when you realize that he killed his wife, he instead uses all the occult materials to rowboat her out to the middle of the lake so that he can then resurrect her, seemingly. And once again, you don't see it happen, but it seems to be implied that it's not a good thing that he's doing this. But going to it, outside of that one where you specifically have to go through, well, actually, even that one, I will say. But if we're going to disregard the two joke endings, the UFO and the dog ending, which you probably could have a discussion on those, but I won't really be going into it right here, just for sake of brevity. But essentially, the way that you would get the Maria ending is by whenever you are doing a mission, or no, I should say mission, I guess level, or a sequence, if you will, where Maria's there, there's actually, whenever you run by her, you can bump into her, and she'll have a little animation where she won't say anything, but she'll go, ow, or, she'll make a little gasp, and it's implied that you're just being a little rude. And you do that, if you don't do that at all, and you always walk around the place with her, you don't run away from her and leave her behind, and you always heal yourself. Essentially, if you get the good ending requirements, which is just to beat the game, more or less, which is the Leave Town ending, the happy ending, if you will. That one, you just listen to all the different times where Mary will talk to you, you constantly heal yourself, and you don't kill too many enemies, and then you'll get to the end of the game and get the happy ending. You do the same, except you kill more enemies, and you be nice to Maria, and then you'll get the Maria ending. And keep in mind that also implies killing a lot of enemies. At which point then we will go to, I believe it's, the Rebirth Ending, Rebirth Ending, which does require you to specifically pick up those items. It's a little cryptic. The only reason I find it a little harder to associate with the other ones is just because at no point does the game ever really tell you outright that you're supposed to be using these to possibly bring someone back to life until you get the last item. And at that point, it's just, you kind of think, well, why would I need to get the other items if I have just this one book about resurrection? But, oh well. Regardless of all that stuff, the in-water ending then is most people's favorite, and in that ending, all that the player actually has to do is do all the requirements for the good ending, kill many enemies, but you have to treat Maria poorly, and you also have to heal yourself as little as possible. Basically, let yourself be near death. And I think that this is really cool, because once again, the game doesn't tell you how to get these endings. It'll tell you you've got this ending out of these many whenever you beat the game, but it won't tell you there's this many more, or you can do this and this. And they tend to give you little hints early on. They'll leave an item for you, or you'll get something else. And one other thing I want to point out too is the joke endings and the rebirth ending do require the player to have already gotten, I believe, at least 2 or 3 other endings. I forget that exact number before you can unlock those. So, in a way, it's saying these are extras. These are not meant to be part of the game, and I do agree with that. I once again, I do think that there's like a happy, sad, bad, and evil ending in that regard. But I think that's really cool because these are all done through the player's choice, and it's not really ever done in an outright kind of binary decision making. One example I'd say of something that doesn't really do it well, the whole decision making thing, and it doesn't really have an impact on the game either, would probably be BioShock Infinite. I do like that game. I won't say that I don't like it, but whenever you're given a decision in BioShock Infinite, the only differences that really happen, if any, because some of the choices that the game gives you don't have any choice or don't have any impact, but you'll be given a prompt, press left trigger to do this action, right trigger to do this other action, or you can just wait it out and then you won't do either action. But a lot of the times it doesn't really change that much. Real quickly, I'll go over one of the choices. And there's a video I've seen that actually has someone explain it pretty well in their own regards. In the beginning of the game, you first go to this city, and it's filled with a bunch of old-timey racist people. Once again, I'm abridging this a lot. But there's actually an interracial couple, and they tell you you're in basically a lynch mob, and they tell you, oh, here, throw the baseball at this interracial couple. You're not given any reason as to why you should do this, besides possibly that you'll stick out because these people are crazy, and if you don't throw it, maybe they'll get mad at you. The problem is, whether you throw the ball at the couple or not, it doesn't change anything immediately. Later in the game, if you don't throw the ball at them, or if you do throw the ball at them, they'll still show up and say, thank you for not throwing the ball at us, and they'll give you a slight, I think it's a health pack or something like that. And you kind of go, well, okay. Another one is where Elizabeth, your secondary main character, asks you what necklace you should take, a bird or a cage, and all it changes is what necklace she wears, which the player will rarely ever see because it's on her neck and it's very small. And just instances like that where it's in your face, it's telling you you're making a choice, and it's letting you know this is going to be really important, and it ends up, sometimes it'll be subtle things. There is one decision where if your character at least, decides to be hasty and demand help right now from a character who he doesn't know is a villain, the character will stab his hand. This right here, by the way, is, of course, some of the stuff I was talking about earlier. This is right here probably the main villain of the game, I would say, Pyramid Head. And he is... once again, I guess to spoil it, he is more or less a subconscious manifestation of James's desire to punish himself. And once again, I won't go into it, but a lot of this game is based really heavily off of Carl Jung's psychology, and just how the whole idea of, the different archetypes work. Pyramid Head here is clearly the shadow. There's the character Maria, who's probably, I would say, the anima. And things like that. Once again, I won't go too far into it outside of that and the whole collective subconscious thing. But yeah, and just kind of to finish off with the Bioshock thing, the reason I like it in this game a lot more is because it doesn't make it inherently an obvious choice when you do these actions. And granted, it only really affects the ending. It just changes, well, what's the final scene you see, more or less. What video file plays at the end of the game. And I do agree that, I think you could make an argument with that, well, it's not really that big of an impact. It just changes the last cutscene. But the last cutscene of the game kind of changes the entire outlook on the game itself. And depending on how the player, plays the game, it impacts them in that way. I do think there are some times where, maybe a certain ending didn't quite work out. Maybe you just didn't know you were bumping into Maria, but you really liked her. Maybe you didn't know that would change anything. But, oh well. Now you don't have the Maria ending, even though you probably should have. But if we're putting aside that possibility, I think that this game does really well in that aspect because of the fact that it's letting the player naturally choose what they would do without telling them. If you tell a player, hey, you can get the good or bad ending by doing this, 9 times out of 10, the player's going to pick the good ending because, they probably feel emotionally attached to the characters or the setting or anything like that. And they'd rather not just, get the bad ending. They don't know how that's going to affect anything. When I can think of so many games where I didn't really know what the good ending was, but I wanted to get it really badly because I didn't want to go, I wasted my time and I got the worst ending, or I got the most simple ending. Because you can feel kind of, I sunk all this time into the game, I didn't even get the proper ending, as it were. And that can be really frustrating. But if you just let the player naturally select it on their own without being conscious of it, I think you get a much more, I guess you could say, honest or accurate depiction of what the players would actually do. We don't, in real life, whenever somebody comes up and says, do you want to drive to your job today or take the bus? And for all you know, that could vitally change your entire life depending on whether or not you wanted to drive or take the bus to work that day. But Real life doesn't sit down and say, here is a choice that you need to make. You just kind of consciously do that on your own. And I'm not saying that one way is better than the other. I'm just saying that personally, I find it, at least in this game, to be a lot more interesting and appropriate when the game doesn't outright tell you through like UI menus and prompts that you're making a choice that will impact the story. And real quick too, moving, I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to say on that, is that I think this game does that very well. I mean, it really does it well, in my opinion. I think, especially for a PlayStation 2 game, the amount of little things that it tracks, like I didn't go into it because there's a lot, but there's so many little conversations that you can listen to, and it'll give you a different ending depending on it. And actually, since I was actually going to go into NPCs and ethics, I actually guess I'll just let this cutscene right here play out where we meet another character.
It wasn't me. I didn't do it. Do what? I didn't do anything. I swear. It was like this when I got here.
My name's James. James Sunderland.
Eddie.
Eddie. Who's that dead guy in the kitchen?
I didn't do it. I swear I didn't kill anybody.
You're not friends with that red pyramid.
Red pyramid thing. I don't know what you're talking about. Honest. I did see some weird looking monsters. They scared the hell out of me, so I ran in here.
Well, I guess this place isn't too safe either. What happened here anyway?
I told you, I don't know. I'm not even from this town. I just...
You too, huh? Something just brought you here, right?
Yeah, you could say that.
Well, whatever it is, I think you better get out of here soon.
Yeah, you're right. What about you?
I'll leave as soon as I'm done here. Eddie, be careful.
James, you be careful too.
And with that very charming introduction, we have just met the character of Eddie. And I think that this game, you know, once again, like I said with the other topic, does the handling of NPCs as, I guess, not really opposing ethics, but different, you know, kind of moral compasses works very well. Something I may not have mentioned is how in the kind of world of Silent Hill, when you've entered the town, well, I guess I did say it, yeah, your manifestations mentally will, or your mental consciousness or subconscious will manifest different monsters depending on you and your personal traumas. Eddie there to go over his backstory. As you can probably guess, he did kill that guy right there. And his whole thing is that he actually got bullied at his hometown for being overweight and I think dumb as well or something like that. And he decides one day to take it out by shooting a dog because he wants to feel like he's powerful for once and that he's in charge. Obviously, it doesn't really work out too well. The owner of the dog then comes out and tries to attack Eddie. Eddie then shoots him multiple times and then leaves because he's being chased by the police, comes here, and then kills quite a number of people until the end of the game when Eddie shows up in a meat locker. Or, sorry, James shows up in a meat locker where Eddie already is, and he's killed multiple people. He's hung up people similarly to how the cow carcasses are hung up. And then, yeah, they get into a fight at that point. And we have that character, and then I will see if I can't find real quick the clip where we meet another character. We've actually, in this point in the game, we've already met her, unfortunately. but I will see if I can't find it real quick. The other character we've met is Angela, who is, what, like I said, she's the first character in the game that we actually do meet. Here we go. And yeah, she's the first character we meet, and she's probably the most tragic and also tragic character in the game, but she's also, her plotline is very dark and depressing, and I will warn you of that real quick. So we're just going to watch this real quick before I continue my commentary.
Oh, it's you.
Yeah, I'm James.
Angela.
Angela, okay. I don't know what you're planning, but there's always another way.
Really? But you're the same as me. It's easier just to run. Besides, it's what we deserve.
No, I'm not like you.
Are you afraid? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Did you find your mother?
Not yet. She's not anywhere.
Did she live in this apartment building?
I don't know.
So, all you know is she lived in this town.
What did you say? How do you know that?
Well, I just figured, because this is where you're looking for her. How else would I know?
Yeah,
Am I right?
I'm so tired.
So, why did you come to this town anyway?
I'm sorry. Did you find the person you're looking for?
Not yet. Her name's Mary. She's my wife.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Anyway, she's dead. I don't know why I think she's here.
She's dead?
And I think with that, I'm just going to go ahead and start speaking over this a little bit without taking up too much more time. But essentially, we don't get to the... Actually, I can... We already met Maria earlier in there. But with the characters of Eddie, Maria, Angela, and Lauren, and with James, I guess, as well, they all kind of go in different ideologies as to how they deal with their trauma. And depending on, once again, the player's choice, the outcome of their traumas and their choices kind of goes in a different direction. With Angela here, she, as you find out later in the game, she, as you can see here, has had trauma from a lot of different things, and it's implied heavily that her father and possibly brother siblings sexually mistreated her as she was growing up, and her mother was the only person who seemingly had any kindness for her. And we actually see this by the end of the game when there actually is a moment where she's being attacked by a character that I think is officially called like the Abstract Father or something like that. And it's pretty horrifying, and going into the level design of the area, it's pretty obvious that it's implying some sort of sexual violence, and it's very disturbing in that way, or that regard, as I should say. And yeah, it's as you get to the end of the game, when you get in the hotel, you realize that you kind of see from her perspective for a moment. As James goes up into the stairway where he finds Angela, there's two dead people on the side of the walls, just kind of sprung up and murdered, pretty obviously, as the hallway's on fire. And Angela says that she's already found her brother and her father. She just needs to find her mother now, and then maybe she can rest, implying that she has killed them. And so the way that Angela has treated her trauma is by taking it out on the people who have mistreated her, seemingly. And it does seem to be implied, it's a little tropey, but it seems to be implied that she has also gone insane, possibly even having split personalities, as we see from the shot in which she is mirrored, quite literally, in the wall mirror. I think you could go either way with that. They never really imply it more than that scene right there, but she could have a split personality. And I don't really think it's that important to her character, at least in my regard. With Eddie, once again, he ends up killing all these people because of the fact that he can't really take criticism or any sort of humor against him. And yeah, he doesn't like that. And he actually tries to take it out on James. And the problem actually is that when he just realizes or has the idea in his head that everyone is against him, he tries to just go against everyone. He tries to kill everyone, tries to kill James, and James, in self-defense, kills him. So he, in another way too, tries to take it out on the other people. He doesn't blame himself or reach internal, or he doesn't internalize that he is at fault and try to come up with a better way around it. He instead just goes, well, there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing. I'm just going to he more or less just keeps digging a hole for himself, unfortunately. And it gets him probably, I don't want to say what he deserves per se, but, it gets him in he gets him into a position that is I guess deserved, is what I'm trying to say here. Apologies. But with Angela, it's a lot more tragic. And you just kind of see that she never really thought of a way to get help, as it were. And when you do, as I was saying before, when you get to see her perspective, James does make a comment, has this hotel always been on fire? Because it's only in flames in that one scene there. And then Angela says, it's always like this for me. And then she just walks away into the flames, never to be seen again. Whether or not she died or just left is, probably open for debate. And I don't think it really matters. That's the last time that James gets to see her. And the implication is pretty obviously that even if she didn't die there, she doesn't really feel any better than she did before. She, may have taken her anger out on the people who mistreated her or neglected her, but it doesn't fix anything, To put simply, an eye for an eye doesn't make the world go around. And yeah, then the character of Lauren, she's pretty much the standout in that she doesn't have any trauma or problems because she's just a little kid. What problems can a little kid have, more or less? And in that sense, I do find it that she's kind of the hope for James in a way. And yeah, they each kind of, though, have these specific little differences between them. And once again, depending on the ending that the character gets, it can change the moral of the game, pretty much. And, even though fans and some developers have said that they think that the in-water ending is the best ending, personally, I do like it. I feel like it is appropriate. It's more appropriate to me than probably the Maria even the Maria ending. Actually, I can't even say that it's inappropriate, but any ending you get, if you get the Leave Town ending, it's, James was able to learn from the mistakes of these other people and was able to, not only that, but also was able to forgive himself and realize that, hey, just because I've made some mistakes doesn't mean life's not worth living. I'm going to make up for it, and I'm gonna give this girl Lauren a good life. The Maria ending, well, James just repeats the cycle of not just what he did with Mary, but with everyone else. And the cycle starts anew, nothing was learned, and just we're going to lead to more tragedy because people can't, basically internalize their trauma and understand it. They just reject it or reject everyone else. They reject society as a whole. And then you have the in-water ending, where James, instead of taking it out on other people, or at least not taking it out on other people anymore, decides instead to put an end to it in a more dark way. And I do understand people's perspective on that, because James, he did murder his wife and potentially cheated on her as well, and it's somewhat implied, but you could go any way with it, really. Or, he used witchcraft to bring her back to life. Whatever you want, Either way, except for the Maria ending, the cycle is broken in every one. And I think that really is an interesting way to go about it. Apologies again for this, some of this imagery, people. It's pretty, I did warn that some of it was going to be pretty sudden and blunt. And here, I'm just going to kind of finish up some thoughts here as we go into the first fight with the iconic and, in my opinion, somewhat overrated Pyramid Head. But yeah, this guy's the face of Silent Hill. I won't really go into that too much. But yeah, Silent Hill as a whole series, I think, has always been pretty great at going into the morals and ethics of things, and also just having a very interesting way of telling a horror story that you don't really see anymore. Silent Hill 1, for a PlayStation 1 game, is one of the best looking games in that console I've ever seen personally, and does this narrative from a different perspective. It's more so based on you play as a character named Harry Mason, and you are finding your daughter, who, I won't go into it, but has basically merged with another girl there for some reason. It's not really explained that well and is a little confusing. But essentially, as you go through the town and you find out more about this little girl, you find out her different little fears and issues that she's had growing up in the town. You find that she had to read a story about a giant lizard, and so one of the bosses you have to fight is a giant lizard. She talks about how she never liked butterflies. One of the bosses is a caterpillar that attacks you, turns into a cocoon, and then attacks you again as a butterfly. And no one ever says, oh, her fears are becoming reality. It's just pretty subtle, and I do like that. And then Silent Hill 3 is very difficult to analyze because it's very subtle, just like this game, arguably more subtle, and actually is. I feel like I don't really have a good place to talk from because it's a very female-oriented game, which you don't really see a lot of. Even in horror games, you don't really see that too much, and I think that's pretty admirable. And I think that this series as a whole, outside of just Silent Hill 2, which I love Silent Hill 2, but it's been analyzed to death. Everybody talks about it. Everybody knows this game. People say they love Silent Hill, but they just talk about this game. And I'm not saying that those people aren't real fans. I'm not trying to gatekeep or anything. But I feel like the other games really deserve some attention too. And, I mean, the reason I'm pointing this one out is because it's, I don't want to say obvious, but it's the most apparent game. It's the most popular game in the series. And for good reason, honestly. It really does deserve it, I think. But, yeah, I just kind of wanted to make this little video on the different ethics and the almost moral system, I guess if you could say, that this game has, and how I think it does it so well. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it out on this little shot here. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Have a great day, and see you guys next time.